Okay, good evening, everyone. You'll realize that everyone is muted, and and all the videos are off except for the host and the presenter. So we'll be keeping those off until the presentation is over, just to help conserve some bandwidth. And when we get into the Q&A, we'll reactivate mics as necessary. So thanks again for joining us. My name is Omar Mohammed. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at the Cropper Foundation. And we are in the second of our four parts of our webinar series, where we're trying to pass on a little bit of what we know, however much that might be, to people who are interested in making a career out of protecting the planet. So, Salome, I will introduce you to her in a little bit, but just some quick housekeeping logistical notes for the webinar. If you look at the control tab at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a couple of functions that you might want to use throughout this webinar. First, you'll see a chat function where Salome and I would have said hello to you all earlier. You can send messages on that to either the entire group or to the host and panelists, just in case any technical issues happened or you'd like to bring something to our attention. You'll also see a Q&A button. If you click that, a box pops out and you can ask a question or make a comment either during the presentation of Salome's or during the Q&A session after. If you ask a question, other people can also upvote that question, just in case maybe they thought of a question, but someone else got it before them. You can upvote, and that moves it up in terms of priority. So when we get into the discussion session, I'll look at that Q&A, because I'm sure many of you all will have, burning questions and a lot of comments. And when we get into the discussion session, I will first take a look at the Q&A and pick out questions and unmute whoever asked it and give them the chance to ask a question to Salome or give a comment themselves. And then finally, you will also see a raise hand option, which you can also do if you want to draw yourself to our attention, if you want to make a comment or respond to something that might have been said. So all those things you can find at the bottom of your screen, and all those things are just part of the interactivity of the webinar. So those are just some housekeeping rules, just to make sure that things go smoothly. So I will hand this over now to Salome, who, as you would have seen, has, quite an envious bit of experience. She does what I think many of us dreamed of doing when we wanted to become environmentalists, so work in the environment. Salome has had quite a diverse background, both I think in terms of experience as well as growing up. When she was actually at the Cropper Foundation volunteering for a couple of months, we always kind of forgot sort of where she came from, what language she spoke. It was always like, oh, so did you grow up in Ecuador? Where did you have the pet chicken? No, we can never remember really. And I think that diversity gives her quite a lot to talk to us about today. So Salome, I'll pass it over to you now. You can unmute yourself and get started.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for the nice intro, making me reminisce about the days in Cropper Foundation. And yeah, happy to be here and share with you some of the experiences. Shall I share the screen now to get into the presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, hang on, I forgot how to do this. Share the screen here. Is that share? Okay.
Yes, it's working.
Awesome. I'm just getting it into slideshow format. There we go. That's working.
Yes.
Hopefully everyone can see. Please say something if you can't see it. But yeah, thank you so much again for having me. This is the first webinar I'm doing So I'm a little bit nervous. But yeah, let's talk about careers in marine sciences and ocean conservation. And yeah, I want to show you a little bit about my unconventional career journey, but I hope that it serves as I cannot get to where she is or hope to get somewhere there because of her weird background. More, I think it gives you inspiration because I had a very weird journey, and I think it shows that anyone can get there with enough perseverance. And yeah, so currently I'm a PhD student in Canada, in Vancouver, which is why I'm wearing these really warm clothes. And I moved here in January, and I started my PhD, and it's kind of going really slowly because of the pandemic, but you all know everything's slowed down. But before that, I was a marine ecologist at the Charles Darwin Research Station in the Galapagos for almost 4 years. I still actively work with them, and my PhD is based in the Galapagos with the project that I was on. And I will give you some more detail in a minute. But let's talk about why we're all here today, which is you will want to be part of contributing towards conserving planet ocean. People call it planet Earth, but we all know it should be called planet ocean. Most of our planet is the ocean. The biggest biosphere or habitat in the world is the deep sea, actually. And we know very little about it. It comprises of more than 97% of the ocean, and we hardly know anything about it. Most of our knowledge comes from most of the science that we know about the ocean is of coastal ecosystems, shallow ecosystems. When I mean shallow, usually 50 meters above. Below that, we have more studies going towards the mesophoric zone, which is the zone between 50 and 200 meters, where you still have light, and then after 200 down, that's the super deep sea. And there's so much to explore, not just in the deep sea, but mainly in the deep sea. There's so much to study. There's a lot to protect and manage, as you know. Even though it's a huge ocean, it cannot absorb all the pollution that we have been throwing into it. And we haven't done a great job managing it, given that we fished out already 50% of all fisheries that are in the ocean, according to the studies of the labs of Daniel Pauly. And policies, we need policies and laws. So there's a lot of work and job that needs doing. And I think the big questions are, how can I help to conserve the big blue? What shall I study? What kind of job do I want to get and can I get to do this? And what are the opportunities in my home region? And what sacrifices am I willing to make? And we're gonna go over these questions in this presentation, I hope to address them. And some of them, I probably won't be able to answer all of the questions, but we can discuss them later in our question and answer session. And I also want to hear your input. I'm sure there's lots of people here who also have some valuable input to share and to share their experiences as well. And so, let's take a poll here. So Omar is going to help facilitate this. So the first question I want to know about you all, which is, why have you joined this webinar session? And the other one is, what career stage are you at? And that just gives me an idea of things to highlight, or maybe things that I just don't need to mention because it's not in your interest range.
So everyone should be seeing a poll in front of them, and please feel free to answer, and we'll share the results at the end.
Okay. I've also gotten the poll, so I'm just going to click other on the answer. Oh, okay, I can vote. Great. Close this. I think we should all be able to see the results in a minute with some bar charts. Okay, so thank you for answering. Just curious. So 25% are just curious about the topic. They want to learn something different. 25%, so 4 of you said, I want to study and work in marine sciences and conservation. Okay, great. Okay, good. So 4 of you are trained in the field of marine sciences and want to learn about career opportunities. Okay, and there's some of you who are interested in switching your careers and want to get into conservation. All right, and this one person has other interests. Great, thank you so much. And if you can do the other poll for me, that'd be great too. We should get results soon. Okay. So, okay, we've got one person who wants to, who's about to do, is doing or will do their bachelor's. We have some people who've graduated and are looking for jobs or grad school. Okay, we've got some people doing masters. Are people considering doing PhDs? Okay, we have a lot of people employed. Good. I hope that stays so. And considering of switching jobs, and we have a few others. Okay, great. So awesome. So I'll just move ahead. That gives me an idea, and it gives you guys an idea as well who's in the crowd. Let's see. How can I move forward? There we go. So, I mean, it looks like a lot of you are ready. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse on the screen as a pointer?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So it looks like a lot of you are maybe here, you've got a job and you're maybe looking into graduate school to see if you can enter the marine science scene or ocean conservation. For those of you who are, for that person who's still doing their BSc and you're interested in a career in marine sciences, if you're not already in marine biology, that's okay. If you are, great, then you are. I did not study marine biology, and I wish I had, obviously, now that I'm here. But if you are doing biology, ecology, no problem at all. I know a lot of people, a lot of my peers have a background in any of those kind of environmental fields. And I think that the main thing is that you're taking stats, genetics, biochem, and those will all make the path easier. Now, I don't have that background, and I'll talk more about like my background, but that would make things easier. I think if you are considering going into postgraduate studies to get into this field, get experience and volunteer, do internships, workshops, courses, find opportunities. And I know this is sometimes a bit of a luxury or a privilege. Not everyone can just leave their job and start volunteering or earn no money and survive. If you do have that opportunity, it's gonna make things easier, because if you come from a different field and you wanna get into grad school, you have to demonstrate that this is really what you wanna do. So they wanna see that you've at least tried to get some experience or some exposure. So that's why this is really worth your time, especially if you don't have some background in sciences, especially environmental sciences. And once you are in postgraduate studies, there are many, we can talk about this later and you can ask me questions. I had a really interesting experience. I managed to get everything fully funded in North America. Apparently that's normal if you do a research-based master's. It's normal to get everything paid for, including your fees and your living expenses. And that's not just because you're brilliant and you got a brilliant scholarship. That's the way the system is set up once you do a science-based master's, not a professional master's. So, but there's ways of like navigating that path to successfully get into a program like that. And I didn't have outstanding grades. I did have some experience, and I did volunteer a lot, such as in the Copper Foundation. So I did have that. And then through this entire journey, wherever you are, I think there's some really key skills that will really help. And it's really important to take every opportunity you can to build on them, whether you're during academia or volunteering, but get field and lab work experience. If you're, and this will really help you know as well if this is for you. Maybe like go on a fishing trip, go and maybe there's the fisheries department wherever you're from needs people to counts of the fish on the boat. Go diving, go snorkeling, go and explore and see how you feel in the water. Does it terrify you? Does it make you curious? Maybe get dive qualifications. Maybe the field is not your thing, but you still really want to do this, and that's okay. I know so many marine scientists who don't do field work, who are not in the field, who don't even know how to dive. Some aren't even good swimmers. And they play a critical role in advancing marine sciences and the conservation of the ecosystems in the oceans through analysis, statistics. They do grant writing, they do fundraising. These are all critical knowledge and skills that we need in these fields, and science communication, obviously, as well, is really important. So I think those are all skills that are worth building up. And if you have them already, that's great. I mean, at that point, maybe all you need is like one more course or one more year of dedication for you to do like a complete switch. All right. And I had a very different journey, and I'll briefly go over how I became to be a marine scientist and why I feel I am a marine scientist now. And for a while, I had a mix of like maybe imposter syndrome or not coming from, I mean, I didn't study marine biology, I didn't study biology. So it took me a while to get there. So a little bit about my journey. Actually, my first career ambition when I was like 8 was to become a hairdresser, and that's an excellent and a perfectly good profession. But for me, I mean, there's a big topic about unrepresented hairstyles back when I was a kid. That was a big thing, but also I was dyslexic. I didn't know that then. I hated reading, I hated writing, never did well in it. School was hard. I liked it, but it was hard. So I just wanted to be a hairdresser because I liked combing my hair and fixing it up, and I didn't have to do lots of reading and writing. Well, that's what I thought, at least. And I also, school was tough because I moved around a lot. As Omar said, my mom still works in international development with coastal communities. She's natural resource environmental manager kind of person. So she worked in different parts of the Caribbean, Dominican Republic, Ecuador. We lived in Spain. So I changed school a lot, changed languages a lot, thus this accent. And I was homeschooled for 5 years. And why do I say all this? My sciences were really bad. Like I had no biochem, no chemistry. Biology was fine. That's easy to learn homeschooled. I had no physics, no maths. I got to high school in England and I failed high school. I had to retake the last year. I got my crap together and I made it into uni. Everyone was shocked, including myself. And I did geography mainly because I didn't really know what else to do. And geography was kind of like this all-compassing. You can do environmental studies together with development studies. And I still recommend it. It's a beautiful subject. And I fell in love with biogeography and freshwater ecology, and I really thought I was going to end up doing like water resource management, especially of freshwater resource management. And then I graduated, yay! And then there was an economic crisis, and we should all hang in there because I think we're going to I think we know we're going to go through one. Apparently it's going to be worse than this one. That's not what we're going to talk about today. And I faced unemployment, so I moved to Trinidad and Tobago after graduating, which is my motherland. My mom's from Trinidad and Tobago. And I got here and I naively thought I would walk into a job, not the case. So I had the luxury, mom and dad were around, so I had to live under their roof. And I did a lot of volunteering. I was at the Copper Foundation, Asa Wright Nature Center, which is this bird sanctuary. I did some environmental education stuff for them. And then I also went to Coral Cay, which was this NGO in Tobago. And this time I spent 3 months there, and this set a very important stepping stone for me of why I am here today. And it's funny because sometimes there are these things that we do in our past that we later on realize, well, had I not done that thing, I would not be here. And this is one of them. And that volunteership, they taught me how to dive, which is not that cheap to get into. So that was a great opportunity for me. And they taught me how to do coral surveying. I got to witness a mass bleaching event of coral reef ecosystems. So I learned lots. But then reality hit. I needed to get a job. So I actually found a job in marketing and branding in Trinidad and Tobago, I did that for 2 years. It was great, it was fun, but I also came to a point, and I think that's for those of you who want to change career, maybe, I mean, for me, this was really important. I realized I am not happy or satisfied working in the for-profit sector and for a sector that was only interested in making profit, regardless of whether it's good or bad for the environment, mostly bad, and for people as well. To say the least, my clients were Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever. So yeah, I like, it was, that was a push to like apply for grad school. And in the meantime, I was lucky enough to get a job as an environmental educator in a small recycling firm called Plastic Keep. I'm not sure if we have any Trinis here, they might remember Plastic Keep was around for a while. And when I decided to go to grad school, I was like, oh, I don't even know what to do, but I know I want to do like either resource management or sustainable development or science, but I was scared of science because I didn't have that strong numerical or quantitative background. So I applied for a master's in recycling. I applied for one in water resource management, river ecology and climate change. And I got through with the climate change one at the University of British Columbia. And the professor there was actually said to me, like, listen, I'm doing the impacts of climate change on coral reefs. Is this something you're interested in? Do you have any experience? Bam. Yes, I do. I'm trained, I've got diving experience, I know how to survey corals, I know the fish species, I know the coral species. And I got a full scholarship, and I spent 2.5 years completing my master's. I led my first field study in Tobago on the impacts of the 2010 bleaching event on corals there. That was super interesting. That's a bleaching event there on the photo, in case you guys don't know what that is. And that's me doing a survey along a transect line. I was measuring and counting corals, living corals, so I wanted to see how many corals had survived following that. And that's where I managed to like pick up a solid knowledge base on marine ecology. And the key skills that I recommend anyone to pick up if you want to do marine science, which is stats, data visualization, manuscript writing. And by manuscript writing, I mean the writing of scientific papers to be published in scientific journals. And I graduated, yay! And then I was unemployed again. And that was tough. And I mean, some of you probably have lived this. And I think I had a bit of depression at the time. And I did land some jobs here and there. I was contracted as a field ecologist. I also had an opportunity to be an intern at an NGO. Luckily, it was a paid internship. But you know, you get a scholarship to do a master's, and you think you're gonna get out of this job suddenly, and you find yourself again doing internships. And now I realize how this was actually a really great experience as I accumulated more fieldwork experience, as well as during my time at that NGO. I learned how to do grant proposal writing, and that is something that changed my life later. And science, and if you want to do science and all the other aspects of marine science and conservation, grant writing and fundraising is absolutely essential. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a bit. So then after filling out more than 30 job applications, mainly for Canada, but also anywhere in the world at this point, because I was desperate. This was one of the dream jobs I thought I would never land. And suddenly I got an interview, and I got the job to move to the Galapagos, which was a little scary. It's these tiny islands in the middle of the Pacific, in the Eastern Tropical Pacific. But I'd lived on Trinidad and Tobago, so I knew like I can survive island life. Definitely a lot smaller, but I knew I had it in me. And I think some of the key factors for landing this job for me was, while I was unemployed, I tried to be as productive with my time as possible. And that was, I decided to turn my thesis into a scientific publication, and I worked together with my boss. So while I was unemployed or also doing these contract jobs, I was working on my manuscript. I published it. So when I applied for this job, I had just gotten my publication published. And they confirmed with me later. I asked them, like, how come they picked me? And they're like, well, you were one of the few who had a publication. And that counted for a lot. Also, I had accumulated a lot of field work. I had proven skills in data analysis and managing data sets. And I was fluent in Spanish. So for those of you who speak another language, make sure you don't undersell that. That can be really important, and use that for looking at job opportunities or academic opportunities in other countries that's had that language. And if you don't have a language, consider learning one, especially during one of those times where there's not much to do, maybe like now. And I think the Spanish and the scientific publication is what like helped me get this job, which was very, very, very competitive. And that's in that hour here, you can see that's Biomar, the Marine Research Center, and that's where I spent a lot of time. And I mean, while I was there, I think it took me about 2 years to accept and know that I'm a scientist. I'm a marine scientist. I'm doing science, and I am a scientist. And I think that's a lot of us carry the imposter syndrome sometimes. Or we don't fit in, or I just scrambled into this, and I don't know if I can hold my ground. And at the beginning, I was in a lot of doing a lot of different things. I was part of the shark monitoring program. I worked with the fisheries program. I was part of the ecological monitoring campaign with a group of people who go out once a year and survey all the reefs around there, which was great. But at the time, I still felt like I was more a technician, a field technician, which is also a great profession if that's what you wanted. But what I did during that time was also like, okay, I need to publish another paper, because publishing, some of you guys know that already, is our currency as scientists. Like, if you want to have weight, you need to have publications on your back. Not many, and good scientists will know, can differentiate between a good and a bad publication, but have some good ones, and that would be important. If you have an opportunity to be part of or lead a publication, I would say jump on that. And there's so much data out there. Now I realize how there are so many opportunities to do publications, so we can talk about that later as well. But I picked up a lot of great skills, and one of the great things of working here was I worked inside, my work was based in the Galapagos Marine Reserve, which is one of the oldest and largest marine protected areas in the world. It was declared in 1998, which doesn't sound that long ago, but at the time there were hardly any marine protected areas. And right now, marine protected areas is a hot topic. It's one of the millennial goals of the UN. I think they want to get to 10%. They wanted to get to 10% by 2020. I think they've extended that to 2025. And it was really interesting because once you are working in a marine protected area, there are many different rules and policy and management that comes in. So I got to learn a lot about that. But I think what really, when I've started to feel like a proper scientist who has their research and their crap together, so pardon my French, was actually during a low point of working in the Charles Darwin Research Station. And, you know, it sounds like a dream job, and it is a dream job to a certain extent, but every NGO, and Omar can share this with you, has its issues, and there's funding problems, and you don't know how long you're going to have a job for. And I'm working at a research station where they constantly remind you that everybody wants your job, and you can't ask for a raise. If not, they'll find someone else who's willing to do that work for less money. So it wasn't like all roses, but in terms of the exposure, incredible. And after a year working there, I was put into this project here called the Seamounts and Deep Sea Research Project, which sounds super sexy, but at the time, no one in the Marine Department wanted to be in that project because the field work had been done. All the data was collected by these incredible cruises before I even arrived, and the project essentially was stacks of hard drives full of videos and data that needed analyzing. So no one wanted to go all the way to the Galapagos and then spend all of their time analyzing videos on a screen. So, but because of issues and big egos that you have to work with in a place like Galapagos, and I think you guys know this from Trinidad or from anyone who comes from island communities, in these spaces we have a lot of people who become a big fish in a small tank, and it gets really hard to work with big egos in the scientific field, but that's something you learn as well. But I ended up on this project, and at the beginning I was a bit resistant, but I started looking at all this data, and fell in love with it. And I realized I'm sitting on a gold mine when it comes to like loving the ocean, because I got to do the first characterization of deep sea habitats in Galapagos. I started networking with all these taxonomists from all over the world, because there's a limited number of taxonomists. Taxonomist is someone who specializing in identifying a specific group of organisms. So here I worked with over 25 taxonomists just by email or call, asking them like, what is this? Because we didn't know what half of these animals were. And I'm part of this group who's now doing the first description of the deep sea organisms that we have in Galapagos, which are all new records. We have over 33 new species to science, and it's been a really fun journey. And one of the problems we ran into is that there was a lack of funding. So at one point I was the only scientist on this project. I had the help of some volunteers, and I became the de facto leader, which was very stressful, but also a time to like step up. And I think this was about a year and a half ago, one of like that point that changed it all for me, and I felt like I became like a solid scientist all the way through, was when you actually have to develop your own project, and not just that, but do the fundraising for it and do everything, develop a solid project and the budget behind it, and propose it and write a grant. And I got through, and to do that, you have to build collaborations. So many skills that I picked up from my marketing background helped. When you volunteer a lot, like I did in Trinidad and Tobago, you have to meet new people, and you have to get over yourself, and you have to learn how to collaborate, how to network. And that all came in handy. And this allowed me to secure a grant with National Geographic and work with this engineering firm that has these ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, that can go down up to 1,000 meters. And this gave me the chance to lead my first research campaign as a PI, or principal investigator, which means that you get to call all the shots, but it also means that everything that goes wrong is your fault. And what I proposed was to explore shallow seamounts. So seamounts are underwater mountains, and we have lots of those in Galapagos because of all the volcanic history. I wouldn't be surprised if there's lots in the Caribbean. I'm not entirely sure. And I wanted to see if it was possible to explore these seamounts using these commercial, cheaper kind of marine tools. And I managed to convince this company called VideoRay to volunteer and bring their gear and all their equipment to do these surveys. And this was not easy. This was the hardest part of probably my career until now, even though I think I'm still at early career stages. I mean, I wanted to quit science the day this happened. This is an image here. You can see the cord is completely tangled up of the ROV. So the ROV is a robot that swims underwater, and we still can't use drone technology, GPS underwater. So you still have to have a cable on the ROV all the way. So we have this 300-meter long cable. It's tangling up on this tiny boat that I had rented. We have a generator there, you can see at the end, and I'm at this point getting seasick. I think I vomited a few times after that. We cannot find the seamount. The waves got bigger. We almost got under a wave, and I put everyone under risk. And it was super, super stressful. In the end, I found another boat, and my field campaign went from 10 trips to 3 trips because I had to get a more expensive boat, and that wasn't within my budget. And I'm just exemplifying this to you. Oops, let me pause that for a second. It's not all glorious all the time. And that fieldwork experience also made me think about, like, why am I proposing to do fieldwork? Like, I get sick on boats, and you really want to think about if you want to become a marine scientist or do conservation work in the ocean, make sure you are into being out in the ocean and on a boat. It's not easy, and it's not that fun sometimes. I mean, I love it and I still want to do it, and I can't wait to be on a boat again, but sometimes it's type 2 fun, you know, it's fun, like, you don't enjoy that moment, you enjoy it after. But yeah, but this was a glorious moment, what we see here in this video. I don't know if you guys can recognize it. This is some of the footage at 50 meters. And so we're in the tropics, right? In the tropics, we tend to have corals, and I was hoping to find corals, not photosynthetic corals, mainly cold water corals and sponge gardens. And instead we found this, and this is a type of macroalgae called kelp, from the group or taxa called Laminarialis. And kelp belong to the cold parts of the world. So to find it here in the Galapagos is like finding a penguin in Barbados. But we do have penguins in Galapagos, and we actually do have a kelp species in the Galapagos that we all knew about. And I was super thrilled because I thought I found a kelp forest of this kelp species called Ecklonia galapagensis, and that was thought to almost be extinct because of the El Nino events that happened there. But when we got some samples, we realized that it's not that one, and we found a new record for the Galapagos, possibly a new species. And that's when I had my moment of like, wow, this is so interesting. I want to find out more. And I was like, okay, I need to do a PhD and become a full scientist all the way. And I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, probably. And then this was probably the most glorious moment of, I don't know if you guys heard of Sylvia Earle. She's one of the ocean elders. She's an amazing lady who does a huge amount of work for ocean conservation. And she was a marine botanist, so she studied algae underwater when she was younger. And marine algae, marine macroalgae. And she found out about what I found, and she was coming to the Galapagos anyway, and she invited me on her cruise. And she brought the submarine, and we went down to see the kelp forest and as well to other habitats down to 300 meters as part of the other campaign that I'm working on. And this was absolutely fantastic. And it also helped me to collect more data for my PhD. So always thankful to this moment. And so now I'm doing my PhD using that data, and hopefully COVID won't change my plans too much. I don't know when I will be able to do field work again, but let's get back to like doing a career in marine sciences on our planet ocean, and to some of these questions, answering some of these questions. And in a minute I will open the floor and you guys can chime in and ask me more questions. But in terms of what to study, so we have an idea of like either doing undergrad or maybe doing postgrad, starting with a master's, then a PhD. And Omar asked me to kind of like highlight the hot topics that are big now and that are a focal point in marine biology. I'm just going to close the door. Bear with me once. And first up, I think that every marine scientist you'll ask will give you different answers. And it just depends on what you're into and what you study. So, and they'll say some things are more important or hotter or more interesting than others. I'm just going to go for what I think, and I'm basing this mainly on what I've seen gets funded and gets funding, whether it's for academic institutions or NGOs who do their own research, like the Charles Darwin Research Station. And obviously, most things that are closely tied to climate change are getting a lot of funding and attention, especially the impacts on fisheries, critical coastal ecosystems, so coral reefs, mangroves, and kelp forests, as these are critical habitats sustaining biodiversity that is of interest to humans, but as well just generally biodiversity for the ocean. Also anything related to that affects coastal communities, so people. And then loss of habitat and biodiversity because of warming or acidification. It's getting a lot of work now. That usually requires more of an oceanography background. But there's so much to be done. But usually the stuff that gets funding is stuff that is related to maybe a fishery. So for example, here in Canada, they study a lot the impacts on oysters and on zooplankton or phytoplankton that have calcium carbonate shells that are being eroded by the slight acidification change that is ever so slight, but is changing ecosystems and food webs. The other big one that classically always gets a lot of funding is fisheries. That's obvious because it's food for us humans. It hires hundreds of thousands of people across the world, from the artisanal to the industrial fishing. And one of the key ones is doing stock assessments. So they need scientists to do stock assessments. This is a very quantitative background, but also fish life history of many fish species, you can't do an adequate fish stock assessment if you don't know the life history of the fish. And by that I mean how long it lives, at what age does it die, at what age does it reproduce, at what age are they juveniles. You need to know all these things to be able to do models and model the stocks and the size, and that will allow you to give or assign how many fish could be fished by the industry this year without collapsing the entire fishery. I'm hoping you can follow what I'm saying here. So that always gets a lot of funding. And I mean, if I wasn't doing what I was doing now, I would probably do fisheries. I think it's really fascinating. And I've always wanted to do something that is directly connected to people, especially coastal communities. The other big one is invasive species. Generally, we have the ones that are being moved around again, a problem created mostly by humans and globalization, but also now the tropicalization of temperate spaces due to climate change. So places are getting warmer and tropical species are starting to enter those. And a lot of modeling is going on about modeling niches of species, how these are expanding. Then there's marine protected area. That's a super hot topic that gets a lot of money. I don't know if you guys have heard of Pristine Seas from National Geographic. That's a $1 million funded project, and they go around the world trying to help increase marine protected areas and help governments and policies. And that's mainly driven by that UN goal I mentioned earlier about having 10% of coastal areas protected. And now they're looking into also the deep sea and the what we call the pelagic waters, so zones that are outside of the, oh my god, words are escaping me, outside of the commercial zone, that coastal zone that belongs to every country. Specific name for that. It'll come back to me. Deep sea is also a hot topic, mainly because it's very sexy. It's the unknown. It's kind of like the moon exploration of today. It's the Earth's last frontier. I dabble in that field, and it's super interesting. It's very basic science, and that's why I think it suits me, as I don't have such a strong chemistry or physics background. It's very descriptive. It's what we call descriptive and natural history science. Plastic pollution is a big one. Gets a lot of funding, and then tourism impacts. And I think this one's going to be super hot because right now, these last 3 months at least, tourism has completely stopped, and there's such a big opportunity to understand the impacts of all kinds of water sports and water tourism, marine tourism, related to marine ecosystems, as no one, for example, in Galapagos, there's not a single tourist. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting studies looking at before and after the pandemic. And I think if you need to decide what you want to study in the end, my advice is go with what you're most passionate about and see how you can fit it into some of these like hot topics that are being funded. I'm sure you can link it, but in the end, if you're going to do a master's or a PhD, especially a PhD, it's going to be a rough journey. It's going to be a hard journey, and you need to love what you do to like keep the steam going for when things get hard and you start hitting walls. But your passion behind the topic that you've picked will take you through that. So in the end, don't go with what is regarded as sexy now or is the hottest topic or what your professor says. Go with what you are really interested in. That being said, it doesn't hurt to like get skills and get more information about these main topics. But this is definitely not, I'm not exhausted. It's not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more hot topics out there. This is just some of the ones that came to my mind. So now let's talk about what kind of job do you want to get, and can you get it? I mean, I think I'm limited to my own experience and of a few peers. Generally, if you go into this field, most marine scientists become researchers at a university or an NGO. Also, government hires a lot more scientists than we know, at least in some parts of the world. Again, and I always put this at the bottom, identify things that are relevant in your region, like maybe do some research on how much your governments have scientists in their ministries, or are there any scientific institutions that hires people? Sorry. Then there's teaching, and again, that happens at universities. Now, becoming a researcher and a professor is probably what most people who are doing a PhD are aiming for, to become an academic, and it's incredibly competitive and it's super hard. But there are also other types of universities now, younger universities that used to be colleges, and they are more about teaching and less about academic research. So those are employing a lot of scientists across many different fields. And then you can also become a school teacher. I think it's educating the younger generation is probably the most effective way of having a better future in the future, is making sure that people take smarter choices in the decision. And that's in our teachers and in us to do a lot of education. We can talk about that more later. You can get a job in consulting. Environmental consulting is a big one that hires marine scientists here in Canada. I think I knew some people in Trinidad who are working in that too. I'm not sure in the rest of the Caribbean, but there are actually laws in your country that should not allow someone to just develop a port without there being an environmental assessment, and marine biologists would have to come in here and do an assessment. So those are the types of contracts you can pick up. They usually get paid pretty well. It's just job at work. You don't always have a lot of work throughout the year. Then there's aquariums that hire. Here there's a lot of those jobs, but I don't know about in the Caribbean. And then there's a whole bunch of other jobs that I can't list here because they don't have a specific name, but there's sometimes projects by the UN, and I think in the Caribbean, that's why it's really important to see what's key in your region. Is fisheries really important in your region? Is climate change impacts, sea level rise? And then see what government grants or what grants from the US or the European Union are coming in. And usually they hire specialists from 5 to 10 years, and these pretty amazing and unique jobs crop up. And if you have the master's or the PhD, it's yours, and I think it's going to be an incredible experience and a contribution to your region. Those are the ones to look out for. And then there's also jobs in advocacy and fundraising and outreach and education, or like science communication. And build your network. Like I can't say this, and you guys know this already, like you need to network and collaborate and build your network. And you can ask me questions about networking later as well. And the last one is, what sacrifices are you willing to make for this career change or this career? It will require sacrifices. It's a competitive field. And you need passion, persistence, and drive to get through it. I don't think it's all going to be sweat and tears. Am I going way too long, Omar? 1 more minute, yeah. And then I think a lot of the things you have to consider is, in this field, you have to need to live by the ocean, or close to the ocean, and that will mean these places tend to be more expensive. Are you willing to do those moves? And are you up for the field work? That's something to think about. Can you do the volunteering and the internships? I mean, these are all things that you have to sacrifice for maybe a better paid job. And also salaries aren't that high compared to other jobs. And that's also a sacrifice for many people, like changing your lifestyle, because you're going to earn more money, but you might be more satisfied in your heart. And that always takes to work on your ego. And okay, I'm done. Sorry if this was a bit too long. We can do some questions and answers.
Okay, great. Well, I don't think anyone minded going over time. I think we were all very, I think we all miss the ocean right now. I think
Me too.
It's good to at least see it in photos. All right, so we'll get straight into some questions. So I'll unmute you all, and then you can have a chance to ask your question and comments. And then you can also raise your hand using the raise hand function, and we'll also get to you. So first, Skylar Ramdeen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Salome your questions.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Well, I'm still in high school, actually. I'm doing A-levels, and I'm from Trinidad, and I am basically trying to figure out if I wanted to do marine science. And one of the questions I had for you is that if you had any doubts of being in the field of marine science at any point in time.
I mean, yeah, it's a great question. I think I would say the last 3 years is when I felt that I'm a marine scientist. And I mean, I wish I'd studied marine biology instead of, I mean, I like geography, but I wish I'd studied marine biology. So I think I would have skipped some extra learning that I had to do at an older age when we're not as young like you are and we pick up things faster. So I regret not having studied first, but I think whatever you choose to do, I don't think you need to regret it. I think you're going to learn lots of things and there's always a chance to like go in another direction afterwards. And but no, I love being a marine scientist. I know that I love the ocean through and through. I miss it and I crave it. And so as of now, no, I'm very happy I'm in this path.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Skylar, do you want to ask your second question?
Oh.
Since you're on, yeah.
Yes. I wanted to know if you had seen first-hand experience of how pollution affected the marine ecosystems from your research.
Sorry, say that again.
I wanted to know if you've seen first-hand experience on how pollution has affected marine ecosystems.
In the place that I study, that I've done most of my research, which is the Galapagos, we're in the marine protected area. And it's one of the most enforced marine protected areas in the world and one of the oldest. So it was pretty amazing when the deep sea cruises came. Usually everywhere they go in the world, they find evidence of pollution from like Coca-Cola glass bottles to plastic and sacks. And they were really impressed of how little pollution there was inside of the Galapagos, which I think is a very important message as to why marine protected areas and good regulation is worth it and valuable, right? Once you educate everyone who comes into the marine protected area, you educate your local population, we can get to that place where we don't have to be polluting and we can live a lifestyle. And I think that was very inspiring to be in an environment where there is such little pollution. In terms of other moments, evidence in Tobago, when I did my surveys there, I didn't see direct pollution, but we saw what we call nutrient enrichment from the golf courses there. So when they fertilize the grasses or the agricultural fields, that later on would come into the ocean, and we would see algae grow over the coral. And when the ocean becomes eutrophied, it means that algae can dominate over corals. So we saw a lot of evidence of that, and that's kind of sad because we're seeing how we're directly changing the environment and we're changing the ecosystem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Okay, so we have a question from Savita. So Savita asks, is there any way to study or learn part-time? If seeking a career in this field, she finds that most programs are full-time undergraduate courses in university.
I mean, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. I never considered doing part-time, so I haven't done the research myself. I think it just depends what you're hoping to do. What aspect in ocean conservation or marine science are you interested in? Is she there still now? Can she answer that? Like, what do you see yourself doing in this field? Because, for example, if you want to support an organization that does oceanographic research, you want to become a part of the team that does the media stuff, you can totally still get engaged. And I mean, your expertise might not be like in the science of it, but doing the science comm for the project, or the engagement or the fundraising. So I think one thing is to think about like what aspect of the job do you want to do and what skills do you have already that you can directly apply and transfer, and then see what maybe there's a part-time course or just a few more courses that you need to like make you qualify for some jobs that you've seen.
She just said she does not have a particular interest. She was just curious.
Okay, well, I mean, it is one of these fields where like you definitely want to benefit of a lab and an instructor who takes you to the fields and you learn how to do field work. So I think you can learn some principles and some theory online, but I think it's definitely worth being part of an active course for some part of it. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is online learning out there.
Okay, so Surisha also has a question. She wants to know if you can give a short description of your average day in your life as a marine scientist.
It is 90% on the computer. I mean, the average day is right now as a PhD student, and we would be in the category of a scientist even though we're a student. It's, as I'm not in the field and my field site is not here, right now it's a mix between, I'm at the first year, so I'm doing literature review. I already have some data, so I'm doing data analysis. So I'm on my laptop most of the time, but what I try my best is to organize my day between the different tasks that I need to get. And one of them is, for example, we need to do I still need to do my own fundraising for the field work. So I do my science, but then I do the non-science part, which is the logistics and the fundraising. And then also the networking. And the networking is doing things like what we are doing now, right? Attending online conferences, webinars, meeting people, finding people who I want to work with. So it's being a marine scientist is, I mean, depending what you are doing, obviously, but a lot of it is like any other job, a lot of office work. You're on a computer and you need to be tech savvy. I spend a lot of time in R. R is a statistical programming software. And I spend a lot of time on Google and looking for journal articles.
Okay, great. So we just have one technical question, I think, from Hannah Locha, and I think she may be one of those who would have been doing their postgraduate work in your poll. So Hannah, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question to Salome.
Oh. Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. It was extremely inspiring. I had one question regarding the deep sea projects. I know you said they're highly favored. Would you also consider that mesophotic projects are highly favored? Or do you think that when collecting data that depth, like 1,000 meters and deeper, is what is really looked for?
I think they both get a lot of attention. I think the mesophotic might be, I feel like it's getting more attention. For example, I know lots of.
Can you explain to us what mesophotic is for those of us who don't?
So I think what you're asking me is in terms of like funding and finding good collaborations. Is it better to go into like the deep sea realm or the mesophotic realm, which are these two different zones in the oceans? The mesophotic is between depths of 250 to 200 meters, where you still have light or some light, whereas from 200 below is called the deep sea. So it's pitch black and nothing operates with light. So I would say the mesophotic is probably more of interest. It's a tough one, but I think mesophotic more just because now it's getting more accessible at a cheaper cost. There are more and more of these ROVs, remotely operated vehicles, that cost between $2,000 to $10,000 that can fully survey these areas, which now means more labs will have access. So I think there's going to be more people finding out more about this zone. Also, it's regarded as the refuge of climate change. So when the temperatures go up and the surface of the ocean, many organisms probably go a little bit deeper to colder waters. And we think that the mesophotic zone is a zone where many of our shallow species escape the heat. Things like corals cannot move, that's why they're dying. So I think there's a lot of interest to understand how much is this a refuge zone, how different is this zone. And so I would say mesophotic, because if you are right now working in the mesophotic field, I think stay there. But you know, there shouldn't be any too big of a barriers. If you have an opportunity to also do deep sea, do it as well. I mean, my PhD is going to be looking at ecosystems in the deep sea and in the mesophotic.
Okay, so we have one last question before we wrap up. So I'm going to give that honor to Yogita. who's going to ask a question about something very pertinent to us here in the region. Yogita, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I would like to ask a question. Consider myself also. I am trying to get into the business sector, considering plastic pollution. It's ready for zero waste store, and I want to research and more information really concerning plastic pollution and the effects it has on the marine environment. Where shall I get this information, like credible information, and who should I collaborate with?
This you in Trinidad, I assume
Trinidad,
this is right. I would start with the Institute of Marine Affairs. they I think I volunteered there and I worked there I collaborated with them for my master's. And I think if someone would know, it's them. I haven't, apart from Tobago, I haven't done too much work in Trinidad. And I don't know if I can tell you a lot more than that. I wouldn't be surprised if there hasn't, that much has not been done. But I think the other people, I would look at UE and find out if UE is doing something. And then if nothing is being done, or not enough is being done, and maybe that's something you want to look into too, what could be done, and see if other neighboring islands like Barbados or Jamaica, if they are doing surveys and if they're working for them, and see if that could be replicated. I would always see what's happening regionally first before going with methods that other countries are using, because it's more likely that you will be able to replicate something like that. Sorry, I can't provide you with a precise answer.
Also, just a quick to jump in, there is a lecturer at UE, Ladana Kanhai. She's actually been doing quite a lot of work on microplastics.
Oh, great.
In the oceans. I think she's really pushing the boundaries in the region, so she might be someone also. But just before we wrap up, we will also be sending around some of this information via email anyway. So you all would have gotten emails from us. So please, send any questions also, and we can send PDFs and contacts later on. So as we wrap up now, Salome, any final inspirational words for us?
I think one of my experiences in Trinidad and Tobago, where I am from as well, was that I felt like not enough people go into the ocean and go and snorkel. You guys have an amazing coral reef in coral reefs surrounding Tobago, not so many around Trinidad. There's specific reasons for that geographically. And you have amazing coastline, and I always find it sad when these amazing island communities don't have a culture of swimming and engaging more with your marine environment. And I invite you all to maybe take on that challenge, gain some confidence, swimming lessons, and get out there. Really, there's so little, apart from drowning yourself because you can't swim. I used to be so scared of like monsters, and now that I've spent a lot of time diving, and Galapagos is one of the sharkiest waters in the world, and I've dove with a lot of sharks, and they're harmless. There's nothing out there that can hurt you. The biggest threat is us. So go down there and maybe have less fear and just see who's living down there. And there are so many creatures out there who cannot speak for themselves, and we need to speak for them. So engage with your oceans more so you can fall in love more deeply with it. And I think that will help lighten that fire to protect it and study it and educate people more about it.
Great. I think that's a perfect wrap up. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. I know we went over time a bit, but I think the discussion was
sorry.
so that's perfectly fine. I think the discussion was so rich that everyone has stayed. And so thank you all so much again. Thank you, Salome, for calling us. I think what time is it over there? 4 p.m. 4 p.m. So great, thank you all so much again. I'm sure everyone had a great time, and For those of you all who are still with us, please feel free to join our next webinar tomorrow morning at 9:30, where we have another former cropperite talking about forests and landscapes and climate change. So have a good night, everyone. Boom! Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe wherever you are. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, Omar, if you can share my email with everyone and they can get in touch.
Great. Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye.